Good. So we discussed identity and privilege, and basically what privilege is it is the advantages or disadvantages you get from being a certain identity, and how that works is all your identities are interconnected. So if you're a woman, if you are a person of color, if you are LGBT, if you're all of these things together, then it kind of puts you with more disadvantages. And if you're a man, if you are heterosexual, if you're cisgender, you have more privilege than other people. And you can also have racial privilege, white privilege, the privileges that come from not being a member of the global south versus being a member of a country where, like the United States or Europe. And so basically, you get advantages and disadvantages from the way those identities work together. And that it falls in the matrix of oppression, which is the way that our identities play out in the world and what happens whenever we interact with others who have privileges over us or disadvantages. And so how that ties in with rape culture and misogyny is people who have more privilege are able to receive more resources and empathy when they are victims of rape culture, and also they are more likely to be more likely to perpetuate rape culture unless you are actively working against your ability to perpetuate rape culture. And it's this idea, Julie, we can go to the next slide. And it's this idea of misogyny that is like underlying in rape culture. And of course, that is having extreme contempt for women. So this idea that women do not have autonomy. And so in rape culture, women are basically commodities for men and commodities for people who would be violent against them, especially women of color, transgender women, LGBT women, women who are poor, women with less education, especially when you have multiple of these disadvantages or identities together. It is more likely for you to be a victim of rape culture and for you not to get help. But fortunately, there are ways that we can help other women and help people to navigate rape culture. We can be in solidarity with them. We can provide support groups for them. We can actively work to remove the stigma of rape culture. We can educate others about rape culture. We can call our friends out whenever they make rape jokes, whenever they victim blame women and other people who have been raped. And so this is a way of not only saying that, hey, these things are bad, but also saying how we can work through them. We can go to the next slide. And so this idea of misogynoir is that there is racist sexism. And if you are a woman of color who is not black, there's also racist sexism, but it doesn't operate in the same way because people who have privilege can use their privilege to sort of marginalize other people and to gain advantages from society that is against those people. And so with misogynoir, you can use that. You shouldn't use it, but it's this idea that there is a particular oppression against Black women and Black LGBT people that others can use to try to uplift themselves or their causes. And so it's basically a way to describe the erasure that occurs and the lack of empathy for rape victims like Gabrielle Union, who, when she spoke out, people were just like, okay, and that sucks, sorry for you, why did you sign up for this movie? And she wasn't met with empathy, she was met with questions. And that's what happens a lot to rape victims and women, even outside of the sphere of being victims of rape. There's a lot of questions of, well, why did you stay in this relationship with this person who was abusive towards you? Or why did you continue to work at this job which was discriminatory towards you? Or why did you continue to be in a system of in a workplace where they said that women are predisposed to have children and that's why we don't need to pay you more? Like, why? Instead of, I'm sorry this happened to you, how can we make it better? It's a question of why. And so this misogyny is the particular lack of empathy and also the lack of support for having a lack of empathy. And we can go to the next slide. And so also tied in with misogyny is the homophobia, transphobia, and also adultism. And the way that functions is, of course, queer and transphobia. It's pretty straightforward. It is contempt for LGBT people. And adultism is this idea that children don't have rights, and we don't have to acknowledge children's frustrations. For example, this week there was a tragic bus crash, and it happened in Chattanooga, Tennessee, which is a kind of a larger city in Tennessee, which is in the southern U.S. And a bunch of young students, I think they were about like 6th grade, 5th grade, were in this bus, and a parent had complained about the driver. Several students took it upon themselves to write about the bus driver, and the principal complained about the bus driver, but he was never fired because it was a situation where they ignored the children's concerns. Like, yeah, right, y'all are just being bad. Like, no one believed them. No one believed that this adult could have like negative feelings towards children, and it was too late, and 6 children died in the bus crash because they did not receive support from, I think it was the company that commissioned the bus driver. They didn't believe their complaints because it was from children, it was about children, and people assume that children are either lying or not credible or just trying to cover up the fact that they're being bad when that's not the case. And so unfortunately they died because, and of course from a combination of this being a poor school, this being a black school in rural Tennessee, the combination of those factors resulted in children dying because they were not cared for by adults who were supposed to protect them. So it's this idea that young people don't have to be believed and they don't have their own autonomy. And so also the idea of the queer and transphobia is basically the same idea of we don't have to take you seriously because you don't matter to us. And in a society that is based off of this idea that transgender and homosexual people are sinful inherently, so if you're sinful, you don't matter and you're disposable, it's very easy for people to do things to LGBT people and it to be widely overlooked, because if I'm not LGBT, like the majority of people, if you're heterosexual and you feel this way because society tells you to, then you can totally overlook the fact that conversion therapy, which is a horrific thing that people force their children to undergo, so you have children, you have LGBT children, they don't have rights on 2 fronts. So of course people overlook the fact that a lot of children who undergo this commit suicide. So if you don't believe they have rights, and you don't believe that they deserve to live because they're inherently sinful, then you have this idea of people overlooking serious crimes against them because they don't have to have empathy because no one is forcing them to. And we can go to next slide, Julie. Okay, and so those are all of the definitions, and we can go to the next one. And we move to the big overlying problem of rape culture. Of course, we have President-elect Donald Trump, who is awful and just, oh my God, I don't even know how this happened. But he basically has said that you can grab women by the pussy. That's what he said, not me. And he has said this because he and many members of his cabinet, who he's electing this week, feel that women are disposable and they don't have to be believed because men are more powerful in both stature and have more resources and positions. And so he feels like women don't need to be believed, and he normalizes sexual assault. His followers threatened a woman with death threats for months who had a sexual assault case against him, and they threatened her, and she withdrew the case, and now she and other women have to deal with the fact that this rapist is going to be in office and no one is impeaching him. It just feels very hopeless right now. And we can go to the next slide. No one is checking him. People are checking him. There is a lot of activism that is protesting against everything he's for and is willing to overlook. But it seems that any institutional sort of weight against him, it's not looking likely that there is any. But we still can't give up hope because this is such an egregious crime that we can't overlook it. And so that's something we have to remember as people who are global citizens and people who want to see the world do better. We have to remember to be in solidarity with these people. And so this person who has an international position, being a rapist, is something that we have to take into account and we have to constantly remember. And so because his position as a person who has sexually assaulted people on numerous occasions, him having a national position is something that we have to take into consideration, especially with this idea of war rape. It is basically when people use rape as a tool in warfare, it is the systematic devaluation of women's bodies, and it doesn't matter if they are children or if they're elderly women. It's this idea of group rape when people pillage entire villages and just completely traumatize the entire region by taking advantage of all the women there. And so we have this going through numerous eras, and that's why I linked war rape and Donald Trump, because this is group trauma with him having this position being a rapist. And so the group trauma is occurring not only historically, but it continues today. The earliest we on the panel discussed was the Roman women and Vikings. This idea that the Vikings came down from Northern Europe and just systematically raped women in the Mediterranean. And this is why, you have people in that region like today that still show Nordic characteristics. And there's also the rape of the Sabine women by the Romans, and that was during the Roman conquering when they're taking over all these territories. And also the rape of Dinah in Genesis. If you read the Bible, there's a passage where the sister of a lot of royalty is raped by this one prince. And after she's raped, the brothers take the royal brothers, her brothers, Dinah, they go through the prince's entire territory, and they rape all the women there, and they kill everyone. And basically a tactic of warfare which should not exist, because the combat is already enough. Like, you don't need to go any further. Combat is already traumatic enough. You don't need to engage with the women there. And that also occurred in modern history during the world wars with the comfort women and the joy divisions. And it was a way that kind of, in a very messed up way, showed all the different racial categories during the World War II, with Japanese women, Chinese women, and other women of color from that region. I think it was Thai women, who were basically forced into sex trafficking. And so what happened was American soldiers, Japanese soldiers, white American soldiers, Japanese soldiers, Chinese soldiers, and then black soldiers were on this sort of racial category. And the white and Japanese soldiers had access to Japanese women, and white soldiers got them for cheaper. Japanese soldiers paid slightly more. And then the Chinese women were the next most desirable women, and so the white, Japanese, and Chinese soldiers got access to them. And then the black soldiers could only patronize the Thai women, and of course they had to pay like more because they were a racially undesirable group. And it's like, this is a very messed up system in so many ways, because not only are you denying like a group of women their autonomy, you are also enforcing like racist hierarchies, not only in the women but also the people who can patronize them. And so it's like, this is messed up because you are raping people, but it's also messed up because you're racist, and it's messed up because you're taking money from women and you're kidnapping them and stealing them from villages to force them into sex trafficking. And it's very wrong on many fronts, because on one hand, you shouldn't be taking these women, period, but also to enforce like the existing racism is just another level of just horror. And the next modern series, or modern, what do you call it? Next modern example of the war rape is with the Bosnian War and the group rape of the Bosnian women. And also ISIS participates in this, and so does Boko Haram. Boko Haram's kidnapped the girls from the Chibok school, and many of them are still caught up in the sex trafficking with Boko Haram. And those are the girls who managed to escape on their own or were released cannot be accepted back into their villages. So it's like, this, not only are they traumatized by being raped, but they're traumatized because the community is traumatized and they don't know how to accept them back. And in the Democratic Republic of Congo, it's the same thing. Whenever women are kidnapped and raped, they cannot be accepted back into the community, and it's just a very unfortunate situation. You can go to the next slide. But it speaks to an entire gamut of people existing in this rape culture, and that shows why we have to be intersectional, because it's on this scale of extreme, overt rape as a conquest, but also we get to media, and you see rape as a way to sell sex, and you see songs like with Robin Thicke with I don't know what the song is called. But yeah, so the one song he made, it was terrible, and everybody was playing it for like the whole entire year a couple years ago. He had a lot of rape euphemisms in it, and was like, I put Molly in your drink with Rick Ross, and it's all these things where men are doing these casual sexual assault, and it's like, oh, that's funny, and baby, it's cold outside, I'm gonna stay here. And so it's this idea of coercion and coercing women into giving you sex. And so this idea of coercion is normalizing rape culture in the ways that people sort of extract sex from women, and that too isn't right, but it's not overt war rape, so people try to victim blame, and that's how we get from I put Molly in your drink when you passed out to literally the entire ethnic makeup of a region has been changed because of war rape. And it shows that we have to be mindful, and we have to stop the smaller things and stop women from being commodified, being made into commodities in the early stages, so it doesn't escalate to the very overt toxic forms. And we can go to the next slide. I think we're done now. Okay, so here's like the rape culture matrix. And if you want, you can screenshot this. I can upload this for all of y'all. And yeah, we can. This is like a good way to like kind of express the way rape culture functions. And so yeah, this is pretty much all from me. If any of y'all have questions, you can email me or ask me now.